Welcome to another episode of That's Some Crazy Shit with Kelly and James. I am Kelly, and my co-host with the most is Mr. James.
Thank you, my friend, for that introduction. It's always nice to be here. What do we got planned?
Well, today we have another guest. I'm telling you, James, this whole season 4, is all guests, and I think that's so cool. This guy, Mr. Don Mulford, he is an author. We tend to attract authors and psychics. Anyway, this author, he wrote a book called Matchbooks in the Tunnel, How God and Others Solved My Impossible Problem. And he was cured of cancer. And the book is about his journey, how he went about that, how God played a part, and just how it's crazy shit today, because today he shows absolutely no signs of cancer. And the doctors are amazed of how he got rid of this cancer.
Right, it's not in remission. There's right. No sign.
There are no signs. And so he wrote a book about his journey. He's also a hospice chaplain. He is a chaplain, was an attorney, and then now is a chaplain. So I can imagine what his journey's been like. And that is some crazy shit. That's opposite sides of the spectrum, right?
Serious.
So he is our guest today. I can't wait for you to meet him and speak with him. I think his story's fascinating. I say we just get right to it.
Well, let's do it then, my friend.
Let's do it. Welcome to the podcast, author Don Mulford. Don, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm so glad you're here to talk about your book, Matchbooks in the Tunnel, How God and Others Solved My Impossible Problem. I know that you are a cancer survivor and you contribute God and others to solving or curing this cancer for you. I don't know how you got cured, I guess is what the story is, but I'm going to let you tell it. I'm not going to try to tell the listeners what it is, but I just wanted to give you that quick intro and welcome to the podcast.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you, Kelly James. It's nice to be here, and I appreciate it. I was surprised by the diagnosis. I had started a new job, a new career as a minister. I had been an attorney out of college. I went to law school because law school is full of people who don't know what else they want to do with their lives, and that was me. So I followed my friends and did everything. But as I said, the suit did not fit. And I had applied to theology school as well as law school out of college because I had an interest in that. And so that's the direction I went after law. And I went through all the steps, went back to school, and finally found a position in a church in Richmond, California, which I liked. It was a small little church with a nice group of people, and for about a year everything was great. Enjoyed what I did, but had one problem in that I was losing weight and my iron was low, had been for a while, and my doctor didn't know why. So finally he sent me across the street to a hematologist, which is a blood doctor, and I knew that much, but did not know that hematologist is also an oncologist, and an oncologist is a cancer doctor. So when I went to see the hematologist, he came into my patient room, took one look at me and said, "You're sick." And I sort of knew that. And so he did something no doctor had ever done before. He sat down next to me and just said, "How do you really feel?" And I started describing all these symptoms, and I was amazed how many there were. And so he then did what's called a bone marrow biopsy. I didn't know that at the time, which is basically they stick a needle in your back. And it really wasn't that painful. And then he said, "I will be in touch." And so I still didn't know that I was being considered for cancer. A couple of days later, I got this phone call at work, and he just starts right in. No invitation to come to the office and we'll talk it over. Just, you have lymphocytes in your blood and you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a form of cancer. So we have to have you come into the office. And so I realized right then that I had cancer, and it was obviously very distressing. As I described in the book, in the first chapter, I called it the bomb. It was like a bomb went off inside of my head. And then from then on, I was a member of the Cancer Club and had to deal with all that we all know about that is part of that. And I knew immediately that I would never be going back to not a member of the Cancer Club. So the book describes the experience of all that and an amazing amount of things that happened, which were completely out of the blue and really were sort of impossible. And then the cure was impossible. That wasn't expected at all. But I have 2 endorsements from Stanford doctors who say so. But all of a sudden, through prayer and other things, it went away, and it's never been back. That was in 2010. It's 11 years ago. So I don't even get tested for it anymore.
That's incredible.
So Don, like what happened? Were you going through the traditional cancer treatment and you stopped? Did you decide not to have any treatment at all? I mean, what happened? One day you had it and then the next day you didn't?
Yeah, I just started to do what they told me to do. I immediately called a friend of mine who shared my Christian faith and said, what do I do? And he was a cardiologist, and the best one in town there in Oakland. And he said, you do 2 things. One, you do everything the doctors tell you to do. And then secondly, you do whatever you want to pursue your faith, to anything else outside the box. And so that's what I did. So I started chemotherapy. I initially went back and forth as to whether I wanted chemotherapy and whether I thought that was wise. And I listened to some tape about how chemotherapy is a racket by the doctors to make money and keep you feeling lousy, so you will go to them. But then in looking at my doctors, I realized these people aren't dishonest. They don't make their living off of, giving people dying of cancer phony drugs to prolong their lives or make more money. And so that was ridiculous. So the idea of chemo is that it doesn't cure your cancer, but it prolongs your life so that you can then hopefully have a solution that happens before you die. And that's what happened to me. My friend said, get the best medical care you could. So I sent the word out, and a couple of my doctor friends poked around the country as to who's the best non-Hodgkin's lymphoma specialist in the country. And it happened to be at Stanford, which happens to have the largest non-Hodgkin's lymphoma treatment center in the world. It was only an hour from my home. And there was a doctor there named Dr. Horning who had a worldwide reputation. So I was able to become one of her patients. So I clearly had done my homework in terms of getting the best medical care I could. And in the meantime, in Oakland, at the Oakland Arena, a famous healer who was kind of controversial, his name is Benny Hinn, came into town, and he goes all over the world, and he's in Oakland, 20 minutes from my home, 3 months after I get diagnosed. So I figured this is a sign. So I went and saw him and saw just some amazing things happen for people who just came up for prayer to get healed. And so it convinced me that my doctor friend was absolutely correct, that do everything the doctors tell me to do, get the chemotherapy, instead of fool around just juicing and having a lot of carrots and stuff. That's, these special juices, and that stuff's not going to cure your cancer. So So medical care is pretty good in terms of treating cancer. But at the same time, every doctor will tell you, they don't have all the answers and they can't save everybody. And so God's sort of a nice place to go for someone who's got power to do the impossible. So I did that too. So that was the course I took, and it was through all these turns and trails and all for the next 11 years.
Wow. So when you say how God and others solved my impossible problem, who are the others?
Sure. Well, the others are the doctors, and then my friend who was this physician gave me this advice. But then also was a number of friends who really stepped up to the plate and supported me in every way, came alongside me. I wasn't married at the time. I am now, thankfully. And so I was living alone. And so people from all kinds of places helped me in all kinds of ways. So it wasn't just I prayed and got the solution. It was living in real life, doing real life stuff to solve my problem. But God was part of the solution.
So, Don, do you think, do you think that people could change the course of their life if they become more spiritual then? Even let's say if they're later on in life, like my age?
Yeah, I've always been interested in the spiritual. And this, last 20 years after getting well, I then moved into hospice work. I'm a hospice chaplain, which has been really interesting because it's helped me deal with articulating what I went through the prior 10 years and talk with people who would have very meaningful conversations with me because they're dealing with dying, their mother's dying or they're dying. So the last 20 years has been thinking a lot about that kind of question. We clearly are spiritual beings. I don't think there's much argument about that these days. A few years ago, the culture would have us say, I'm spiritual, not religious. A generation ago, you didn't admit you're spiritual. Maybe you're in a religious group, and amongst those people, you'd say whatever you want to about your spirituality. But in the marketplace, that was taboo. But then it became more and more acceptable just to talk about spirituality, or at least admit it. And so you would say, I'm spiritual, but I don't do the religion thing. So at least you could sort of talk about it. Well, now I think, especially after COVID and where the world is today, I would, I don't have a study on this, but I would bet in America, 50% of the people you could walk up to around the country in all kinds of settings and just start talking about something spiritual. And what do you do about in your spiritual life? And they'll have an answer. They'll do something. They admit that they do something. They admit there's a spiritual component to life. And so that's a big shift, I think, in the culture to accepting spirituality. So that being the case, we need to then honor that and accept that for ourselves so that we continue to do things like exercise. You need to exercise. You don't have to exercise, but it's always better for you. And admit the fact your body needs exercise and good diet and stuff. Well, spirituality, you need to address that and do something to pursue that. Look at the massive response and success for like AA. Well, it's a totally spiritual program. The first step is admitting there's a higher power. That's a spiritual thing. I think that at any age, I talk to people dying and they sometimes bring it up for the first time or in a long time.
So you're a hospice chaplain. So, and I'm knowing that the answer is probably yes, you believe in the power of prayer. And
Sure.
So when you find people that have never maybe prayed before, then how do you teach somebody or show somebody how to pray? Because I know that sometimes people have a problem with praying. And
Sure.
so how do you show somebody who's maybe not a religious person, but they want to be able to pray?
Sure. Well, I stumbled into some really good training early on when I started the hospice work, and from a retired Catholic priest who started a hospice training center in Bend, Oregon. His name is Richard Groves, and he wrote the book, The Sacred Art of Living and Dying. And he talks about spirituality in general, and really was brought to my attention, which is something I never heard about or knew about before, which is Celtic spirituality, and how in that old ancient tradition, there was just a sense of awareness of nature and the spirituality of nature and all, and so that it's just among us. And so that being the case, we usually have had something in our life that's happened of a spiritual nature by the time we're older and we're getting to a place that we're dying and we're on hospice. The idea of prayer usually isn't completely foreign to a person. That's usually the exception. I mean, for instance, with atheism, as opposed to agnosticism. Agnosticism is when you're confused about God. Is there God? What is God? And how does that work? That's different than atheism. Atheism says there's no God. And so when I talk to agnostics, I get it. I have certain things about me that are agnostic. I mean, nobody, no matter how much they may say so, can fully explain God. God's here, we're here. God created us. How can we possibly have all the answers? But atheism is a point of view. And when I really look in the person's eyes who claim they're atheists and talk to them, they're usually reacting against something. And so the same ideas with prayer, usually somewhere along the line, they've prayed somehow in some way. And so I then try to apply when I, as a hospice chaplain, come into their world, I come as this Celtic tradition would. And they had a word called anam cara, which means soul friend. And you come along as a peer. You don't come in as sort of the expert, as the chaplain who's there to guide you and help you, poor person. Rather, I honor your journey, whatever it's been, and I just want to help you with it. I want to talk to you about it. Let's bring it out. And as we do, we'll unpack things that have happened in your past that have had to do with spirituality in some sense. Maybe you had a grandmother who taught you something, or you experimented with this over here. And I had one atheist who we talked in depth, and then he realized that he was just reacting against his father who had forced Christianity on him. But he had a grandfather who was just this wonderful, as he called him, he finally realized this wonderful Christian gentleman. And then he just relaxed. And then the atheism just went out the window, and he just had this remembered, this faith he had as a child. So I just, I come in to explore. I come in to be a companion on the hike and just see where it leads. Sometimes, it doesn't go anywhere. I don't have an agenda. I'm not trying to accomplish anything. I'm trying to put the person in the position to reflect on their journey, to try to see the whole landscape. And it's amazing what will pop up.
I like that approach. I do.
And I'm finding that I now, James, I can be on a show like this and talk comfortably with you. 20 years ago, I'd be more, am I being true to my faith and all this? And I realized this is actually being true to my faith, as I can talk to anybody and we just can have a conversation, because I'm not trying to accomplish anything. I don't know an agenda. I'm just sharing what I found.
Very cool, very cool. Don, it has been a pleasure having you. Tell us the name of the book again, please.
Sure. It's Matchbooks in the Tunnel, because my father was in politics and had his name on little matchbooks. And I would take these as a boy into the tunnel that ran between my house, underneath my house, and would light the dark. So it's like a light in the tunnel is the metaphor.
And it's available everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Right now, it's a self-published book on Amazon.
Self-published on Amazon. Matchbox in the Tunnel, How God and Others Solved My Impossible Problem. Don, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you for sharing your views.
And sharing your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it with both of you. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
That was an interesting conversation, Joe. You know, I think, well, I shouldn't speak for you, but whenever I hear a story about cancer, you know, it hits kind of close to home because I've been so affected by it. And to see that someone can cure themselves, you know, it gives me hope for people out there, because that, you know, cancer is no joke, man.
No, and I liked how he put others, because he just didn't, it's not like he just prayed and his cancer was gone. He had to actually do things, right? He had to, there were steps he had to take, but, you know, I liked how he explained who the others were and how those others and God solved his problem and cured him. And then just him being a hospice chaplain is just some crazy shit. I can imagine the stories that he hears, you know, or the things that people want to talk about at the end of life.
You know, it's interesting. I have a friend who's a hospice nurse, and you know that takes a special person to go in and care for somebody that you know is going to die.
Yes.
You know,
and prepare them and their family.
Right. You know, and that's tough. You know, I mean, no one wants to see death, you know, of a family member, and you know that's hard. You know, can you imagine going into a home and doing that? You know,
as your job.
Yeah,
as your job.
Yeah.
Right. So that's some crazy shit within itself. As your job, day in, day out. That's your job. That's what you chose to do. You're right, James. It takes a very special kind of person.
So, you know, good on him, man. And you know, that's, yeah, it's funny because I don't like to use terms that are like religious, you know, but that's, you know, it's like he's blessed, you know. I mean, that's good for him, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed having him. Again, the book is called Matchbooks in the Tunnel, How God and Others Solved My Impossible Problem, and it is on Amazon, I believe he said, and you can either get the actual copy or a Kindle. James, that's all I have for today. Next week, we have another guest, and I'm telling you, if you think we have hit the crazy shit spectrum, next week, the guest that we have is just all over the place with crazy shit. Crazy shit that it just made me be like, wow, that is some crazy shit.
So are you saying that we're getting crazier shit?
Yes. And next week we'll prove it. So if you want to listen to some crazy shit next week, we got it for you. I promise.
Oh, so we got like a guarantee of crazy shit.
I promise it is some crazy shit. My mind was blown.
So money back guarantee, people.
So until then, you can get us at our website, www.thatsomecrazyshitpodcast.com. You can listen to past episodes, check us out on social media. James has a blog. James?
Well, you know, last couple times I've been failing on the random bullshit. Can I throw one out today?
Go for it.
Okay, so this brings me to, you know, we both dealt with cancer, and our guest was, you know, he had cancer. And anyone who's had to deal with chemo knows how horrible it is on your body. Okay, so I guess my question is going, do you think that the patient should have the option to use medical marijuana over, let's say, the state. It's your body. You're the one suffering. Shouldn't you as an individual have the opportunity to use medical marijuana? I mean, I have a really hard time because the state I live in, medical marijuana is available, but it's almost impossible to get.
So wait a minute, back it up. Are you saying that medical marijuana is the same as chemo?
No. What I'm saying is, because chemo is such a horrible thing, the medical marijuana helps you deal with the side effects, the nausea, all the headaches, the muscle, that helps it, I believe. I have, I guess, a hard time with why don't people have the choice to use it? It should be an individual choice. Let's say the state has it, it's illegal in the state, but man, I'm dying, I'm suffering. Can I use it? It's like you're in the hospice state,
I don't think anybody's necessarily, quote unquote, stopping you from using marijuana. If you have cancer, you've gotten chemo, you want marijuana, I'm sure if you could find it, nobody's gonna, I know what you're saying, in a state where it is now, quote unquote, legal per se, and the state has all of these hoops that you have to jump through to actually obtain it. Yes, that I don't think is right. I live in a state where marijuana is just marijuana. Doesn't matter if it's medical or you want to use it just for your own personal use. In Colorado, marijuana is doing well and fine and $1 billion a year industry. It's not going anywhere. I believe if you want to use marijuana as medicine, as any other herb, yeah, you should be able to do that. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm getting frustrated, because I think his story just triggered those memories, my mom being horribly ill, just dealing with chemo. It's like, maybe marijuana would have been able to help her. How many people could it benefit, And
I'm think sure I get frustrated it benefits with a lot. But see, now, James, you're talking where now maybe we should go find a medical marijuana expert and talk to him and ask him. Because, although marijuana is becoming more and more mainstream and people are now realizing that, hey, it's medicine as right. well as, whatever, views are changing rapidly. Right. And I think that states that have marijuana or are thinking about passing marijuana legislation are looking at the dollars. Because like I said, Colorado has hit $1 billion in revenue.
Now, what do they use the revenue there for, Kelly? Education? What do they use the money for there?
They say they use it for a lot of things. Education, roads, infrastructure. So where the money actually goes, I don't know. I'm not an expert, so I don't know exactly where the dollars go.
Yeah, see, that's another thing. So look at how many things it would benefit the patients themselves, and then the industry, all the growers, the sellers or whatever, and then you got, education benefiting, your roads are benefiting. And I have such a hard time with that. It's like, come on, people. Just because I may not believe in it doesn't mean there's not a benefit for it. And it doesn't mean that I should say, well, Kelly, you can benefit for it. I don't believe it, so you can't have it. I have a hard time with that.
Yeah, but, that's the world. Your things are always going to be regulated, right? I mean, and
I understand that, but regulating them to... I guess what I'm trying, you can't regulate morality,
Yes, you can.
Well, I know, yes, you can, because I live in a state you do. But I'm saying you shouldn't have to.
I agree with you. But yes, you can regulate. And when you live in a state that has a lot of restrictions, as you put it, a conservative state, right? And I guess,
that's putting it conservatively.
I guess, James, what you're saying is that you're tired of Big Brother, and Big Brother's always going to be there. And even
not so much Big Brother, Big Elder here.
Well, okay, Big Elder, whatever you want to call it, ups to Big Elder. But maybe one day people will see that marijuana is medicine. It's a stigma. James, that's a whole nother subject. That's a whole nother episode, my friend.
Hey, that was a good random bullshit.
That was a great random bullshit. In the meantime, like I said, we've got our website, www.thatsomecrazyshitpodcast.com. There you can check out past episodes and our blog and our social media. Until next week.
Keep your minds open, people.